You are listening to a Powerhouse Perspective with Bob Andrade. And now, live from SanPedro, here's Pastor Bob. Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to Powerhouse SanPedro. I trust you had a good week, and this week's going to get even better. And this morning we're going to launch you into the best week of the year. It's not many weeks that we've gone, but it just gets better and better, or it gets gooder and gooder. Lousy grammar, but great theology. So how's everybody doing? Good? You all warmed up? A little cold? Need a little warming up? All right, let's warm up a little bit. Did you know? Did you know that the width of your arm span stretched out is the same as the length of your whole body? You know how tall I am? That tall. Did you know that? Ah, okay. Some of you kind of remember that? Do you know, I hear music. Do you know the difference between AC and DC? And I'm not talking about the band. Yeah, okay. So for those of you that don't, let me make it just in case you didn't know. There is a difference between DC and AC currents, and DC electrons move in a single direction, while AC electrons like to shake it up a bit and change from moving backwards to forwards all the time. Hence, alternative current, alternate currents. So the electricity you use in your home is AC, while DC comes from the things like batteries. So there's a difference that, and then you put them together and you have a band. There you go, in case you're wondering. Did you know that it is impossible to sneeze while your eyes are open? Did you know that? Yeah. Yeah. Did you know that if you search for the word askew, A-S-K-E-W, in Google, that the content will tilt slightly to the right? Just wondering. Did not know that. And yes, you may try it during the broadcast if you'd like. Just don't go, hey, look at this. No, just kidding. Did you ever wonder how, because I have, you ever wondered how those big metal ships float? Right? Yeah. Well, those big metal ships float because even though steel is denser than water, their hulls are full of air. They sink until enough water has been moved to match the weight of steel and air in the hull. So that's how, I just never figured that, never thought of that. It's because of the air in the hull. Did you know that? Did not know that, yeah. Yeah. So I got one more for you. And I raise your hand if you knew this one, because some of you might have known this one. Did you know that cold water heats up faster than hot water? Yeah. If you want something to heat up faster, make it cold. Yeah, all right. Well, that concludes our useless random information. Now for some useful stuff. When I first came to SanPedro, God gave me a very specific word nearly 10 years ago. And this word became one of our mottos. Let's see if you can say it with me. Information plus information equals information. But information plus application equals transformation. Since then, God has given us multiple wonderful words for our church family. But his previous words never became obsolete. The previous words that God gives you, they're not old and fade away. God builds on them. It's like building blocks. So the words that you received before that may have come about to a point, don't get rid of them. Don't sign them off. Use them as building blocks in each one. And then you'll see a pattern happening. When you put those words together, if you ever have a word spoken over you, if you can, record it or write it down, and you will begin to see through time how God builds. And there are wonderful words that God has said over our church family, and it was built on this first word here that he had given us. And so it's really interesting how God does that. And now for our next building block. Are you ready? Today we're going on an adventure. And we're going to start in Matthew 25. And I want to draw your attention to the parable of the 10 virgins, or also known in your Bible as the 10 bridesmaids. So depending on what translation you have, it's either 10 virgins or 10 bridesmaids. It's the same thing. We'll go with bridesmaids. It's a more easier common word to use. But let me tell you what a parable is. A parable is a fictitious story that teaches a heavenly lesson. And Jesus used them often. So Jesus used this parable to teach the necessity of preparedness for his return, being prepared for his return. He compares the second coming to a joyful wedding procession in which the unprepared cannot participate. Interesting. Yes, and they're right in the side pocket of there. So let's read it, Matthew 25, if you're there already, and we're going to start with verse 1, and the parable goes on to, I believe, around the 13th verse. So this is the parable of the 10 bridesmaids, a.k.a. 10 virgins. They work in the same way. Are you ready? I'm almost ready. I got, and now, Batman puts his cape on. I put my glasses on. All right, here we go. Verse 1, then the kingdom of heaven will be like 10 bridesmaids who took their lamps and went to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish and 5 were wise. The 5 who were foolish didn't take enough oil for their lamps, but the other 5 were wise enough to take along extra oil. Let's pause there for a second. Here we have 10 bridesmaids waiting for the bridegroom to come. 10 bridesmaids, 5 foolish, 5 wise. What separates the two are whether they are carrying extra oil for their lamps. Okay, still with me? The 5 bridesmaids that had extra oil with them were considered wise, while the 5 bridesmaids that did not have extra oil for their lamps were considered foolish. The word used here in this passage, lamp, is not the same word that we see in Matthew 5:5, where it says put a lamp that was set on a lampstand to light like a typical home, like don't hide it under a bushel, that kind of a thing. It's a different word. The word lamp used here is referring to a larger dome-shaped container with rags soaked in oil to light the way while a person is walking outside. These outdoor torches could last for several hours when extra containers of oil were brought for replenishing the lamp. As the wise bridesmaids did, they had the extra. So let's start again and read. We'll go on from 5, but let's start back at 1, so we'll connect it all. Then the kingdom of heaven will be like 10 bridesmaids who took their lamps and went to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish and 5 were wise. The 5 who were foolish didn't take enough olive oil for their lamps, but the other 5 were wise enough to take along extra oil. When the bridegroom was delayed, they all became drowsy and fell asleep. At midnight, they were roused by the shout, "Look, the bridegroom is coming. Come out and meet him." All the bridesmaids got up and prepared their lamps. Then 5 foolish ones asked the others, "Please give us some of your oil because our lamps are going out." But the others replied, "We don't have enough for all of us. Go to a shop and buy some for yourself." But while they were gone to buy oil, the bridegroom came. Then those who were ready went in with him to the marriage feast, and the door was locked. Later, when the other 5 bridesmaids returned, they stood outside calling, "Lord, Lord, open the door for us." But he called back, "Believe me, I don't know you. So you too must keep watch, for you do not know the day or hour of my return." Now that's the parable there. The 10 bridesmaids, the 10 virgins are bridesmaids who are not yet married. Now, following typical Jewish marriage customs, which is very different than ours because our customs are unlike other customs. And understand that before we judge another custom. Just know that they're different than ours. It was the custom for young people anticipating marriage to go through a period of betrothal. Betrothal. It sounds like I'm speaking Spanish, but anyway, betrothal. Or engagement is another way of saying it. This is a slightly similar but very unlike our engagements. The marriage customs of Jewish culture usually included 2 basic stages of relationship: the betrothal and the wedding. Now, the betrothal stage involved the choosing of a spouse. In this ancient culture, the family usually initiated the arrangements. A man must go through the family with permission of her father and mother. The Old Testament recognized that a good wife comes from the Lord rather than from one's parents. And we see that in Proverbs 19:14. Nevertheless, customarily, the parents of a young man in this culture chose a young woman to be engaged to their son. The second stage of betrothal involved official arrangements with a formal prenuptial agreement before witnesses. So the young man and woman entered into the official state of betrothal. Hard to say. This was a legal binding contract which gave the man legal rights over the young woman, and it could only be broken by a formal process of divorce. Now, at this point, 3 types of gifts would customarily be exchanged. Now, one of the gifts would be a compensation gift. This would be given from the family of the bridegroom to the family of the bride, sealing the covenant and binding the 2 families. The second gift was the dowry gift. This was a gift to the bride or groom from the father, enabling them economically to start a new family. The third gift is the bridegroom's gift. This would be a gift from the bridegroom to the bride as a symbol of commitment to their relationship. So the terminology husband and wife were used during this stage to refer to be betrothed partners. That's unlike our custom. So in their engagement process, they use the words husband and wife. Sexual relations between the betrothed partners were not tolerated during this time, and the girl did not leave her family to live with the man. Sexual unfaithfulness with another person during this stage was considered adultery. The penalty for this was death by stoning. So you can imagine Mary in this culture. About a year after the betrothal, a marriage proper took place. And this would be done in special wedding garments. The bridegroom and friends, what they would do is they would go, after about a year, the bridegroom and the friends would go into a processional to the bride's home. And then they would escort the bride and the bridesmaids back to the groom's home, where a wedding banquet, a feast, would take place. It was at this banquet that the parents and the friends blessed the couple. The father of the bride would draw up a written marriage contract during this time. Soon afterwards, in a nuptial chamber, the couple prayed and then sexually consummated the marriage. This was the typical Jewish customs. Now, take note at one of these parts here. It's when the bridegroom came with his friends to the home of the bride to escort the bride and her bridesmaids in a processional back to his home for the banquet. It was then where the 10 bridesmaids would have been waiting with the bride for the bridegroom to come and take the bride and her bridesmaids back to his home. Are you still with me? Okay. And they would take them back for the wedding feast and ceremony. Now in this process, the bridegroom would come very late at night. Very late. It was customary. I think it was just for the to make it dramatic or whatever, to make it special. He would come and no one would know. That long wait was traditionally long, and sometimes he'd come in the middle of the night. No one knew for when the bridegroom would come. That long wait caused both the wise and the foolish bridesmaids to become drowsy and fall asleep. After the long wait, the cry out in the middle of the night, they hear, "Here's the bridegroom, come out and meet him." The wise bridesmaids awake and trim their lamps to get the brightest light possible for the procession. But the parable takes a surprising turn when the foolish bridesmaids say to the wise, "Give us some of your oil, our lamps are going out." The wise bridesmaids cannot comply because their own lamps will go out if they share. So they tell the foolish bridesmaids to find their own at a local shop. Although it was probably difficult at that late of an hour, they knew where the oil would be. They eventually, in this parable, do find oil because we find out later in the parable that they arrive later. Now, without the lamps, they would have probably made their way slowly to the banquet in the dark. While the foolish bridesmaids are off finding oil, the procession with the bridegroom happens, and then the foolish bridesmaids finally arrive later. The reason for referring to the bridesmaids as wise in all the prior references is now revealed. They are ready to go with the bridegroom to the wedding banquet. Only those who have been adequately prepared are ready to go. The foolish bridesmaids are not, which Jesus accentuates by stating, "And the door was shut." The foolish bridesmaids finally arrive, but the bridegroom calls out to them as they stand in the night darkness, "I tell you the truth, I don't know you." Now notice that the foolish bridesmaids said to the wise, "Give us your oil." They knew where to get oil from, but they chose not to get the oil themselves. I remember growing up, when you wanted information, you would have to go to a library or encyclopedias, right? Some of you remember that? Today, all you have to do is Google. And if you Google the word askew, you'll notice that it's crooked. That was earlier today. So today we have answers to just about everything. The answers are right in our hands. Yet we are the most uninformed generations. How can that be? We don't have to search for anything, or hunt for answers, or explore, or research anything. People have already done that for us. It's called Wikipedia, right? You would think that we would be the most informed generation in history. Instead, we are the most uninformed generation that is spoon-fed everything, which makes us the easiest generation to be misled and led astray. We depend on experts to research for us. We depend on news commentators to tell us what we should do or how we should think. That goes for both sides of the aisle. As long as you make it look official, Americans will believe just about anything. And now for our adventure, let's start heading back home. Today we can get so much great information on a daily basis that it can become like white noise. I mean, there's great places. There's online. There's YouTube. There's some great teachings on YouTube. One of them is Powerhouse SanPedro. And if you dial that in, you'll see all of our recordings. But there's more, and there's a lot, and we've talked about that. But because we have so much information, because we have so many different places, it can become like white noise. And if you don't know what white noise is, it's like the adults in Charlie Brown, like that. It just becomes heard like it's like it's kind of like looking for a movie to watch with Hulu, Netflix, or Amazon. Have you ever tried that? And you look and you have to pick from 50,000 movies to pick from. And when I do that, after about 45 minutes of looking and not being able to find, I stop because I can't find a movie. After looking for 45 minutes for one movie to watch, I just give up. I watched more great classic movies growing up than I do today. Why? Because we can only watch, back then, you could only watch what the networks made available, right? And how did you know? You go to the TV guide, right? You get the TV guide and you circle the movies that are coming up. And sometimes they played the same movies once a year. But I couldn't wait like for the 10 Commandments to come. Here it is. I get to see it. I can't remember the last time I saw the 10 Commandments with Charlton Heston. I love that movie. I don't know how many decades it's been. I need to watch that. I might watch it today. I watch so many great movies. Today I watch so many poor scripts, poor actors, pointless movies. So many. Why? Because I can. The norm in churches is to hear a different sermon each week. We want a different sermon. I don't want to hear that again. Give me something new, something fresh. And because there's such an array of subjects that any pastor or teacher can teach. I mean, one week we could talk about anger, and then we could talk about giving, we could talk about lying, we could talk about kindness, we could talk about holiness. Have you ever noticed how many sermons are perfect for other people? Oh, that's good. I know who needs that. And then we can go online. We give more subjects there. We could hear about the end times, servanthood, sanctification, gossip. Guess how many of those messages impact our lives? None. Why? Because it's just information. And we're taught that the more information we have, the more we grow. And that's not true. It's just information. That's really called overload. I know someone that spent 1 year reading over and over one chapter of the Bible every day. That's it. For an entire year. One chapter of the Bible was Psalm 91. Now, I'm not saying that you should do that. I'm not saying, okay, I'm saying this because if you want to be spiritual, you should read one chapter. I'm not saying that's not the point. The point is this. More is not more. Sometimes less is more. One of the greatest forms of teaching someone how to do something is repetition. Automatic responses come from repetitious actions. For example, when learning an instrument, the key is repetition. Repetition allows your muscles to adjust, your form endurance, and everything gets ready. I tried to play the guitar one time. And I had a guitar, and I tried to play it, and it hurt so much to get that C. Ow, it's cramping. And then an F. That was enough for me. It's like, ow. And then the pressing on the strings, ow. Yeah, I stopped. I thought, this thing hurts. I'm going to hurt myself. I want to play the instrument, but I don't want it to hurt me. So I stopped. You see, but I knew a friend who wanted to learn the guitar. And he started in the summer, and by the end of the summer, he was good. And I went, how did that happen? He just kept doing it. He didn't stop. When I started to learn the trumpet, I had to learn scales. I don't know if you know what scales are. Different scales. I was supposed to practice scales. That's what our homework was every week. Practice scales. And then when we gathered together with musicians to learn, I started in grade school. When we gathered together, guess what we played? Scales. I mean, I wanted to play songs. Scales. So when I practiced, because we had to practice 30 minutes a day, I ended up practicing only the scales that were easy. The ones I knew. And the ones that were difficult to do, I didn't spend much time on them. Why? Because I wanted to play songs. And so our music teacher wouldn't teach us any songs. So I would go to commercials on the TV and listen to the jingles. Toyota. And I would try to do that. And I'd try to play all these commercial jingles. I mean, coming out of my room actually in my room were all these commercial jingles. Probably what you heard coming out of the room was something different. But that's what I thought I was doing. But scales are boring. Oh my goodness, I already know that one. Kind of like that, only with the trumpet. That was about 30 plus years ago. Since then, I have learned that scales is the best way to warm up. Playing scales is the best way to stretch your lip. Playing scales is the best way to warm up your fingers, your muscles. On top of that, since scales are automatic because of repetition, by now, it has become one of the easiest ways to play a run. A run is when you're playing, you go da, ba da 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 da. That's a run. Ba da 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 da, ba ba da da da, ba da da da, ba da da da. Those are little runs, little riffs in between things. I've learned that those are from scales. Why didn't they tell me that then? As I listen closer, I've realized those runs are simply scales, the difficult ones, and they play them with such ease today, the ones that learn those scales. The key about playing runs is being smooth, automatic. Today I'm limited on certain runs. Why? Because some of those runs, those chromatic runs that were too difficult at that time, they didn't come easy. So I have to work extra hard at putting those in, but they don't come as automatic as some of the other ones do. A good musician will use scales and arpeggios and slurs to warm up every day. Scales, slurs, arpeggios are boring, but a key part of being a musician. To this day, I use some of those same warm-ups. And now I spend a long time with scales. I use those because I know how important they are. 30 plus years later, I'm using those same scales, those same arpeggios, because not only are they effective, they become natural and smooth. I can play those difficult scales now, but they are not as smooth and automatic. So guess which ones I use when I warm up? The ones that come automatic. The ones that just are natural. I wish I took that time back then to learn other scales, because they would have been more automatic for me. When I learned how to play songs today, with difficult runs and or melodic patterns. I spend hours repeating those little riffs over and over and over and over and over and over and over. Why? I repeat them until they become smooth and natural and automatic without thought. Why? Because automatic responses come from repetitious actions. The most enjoyable way of playing for me today is to not play from my mind, but play from my heart. Being able to express what I am feeling through my instrument is the most enjoyable way to play for me. When playing from my heart, it's the automatic riffs. It's the riffs that flow automatically that become the colors I use when I paint a song or pour out my heart through my instrument. In life, the responses to circumstances we use more frequently are the ones that flow automatically. We will respond towards circumstances by what comes natural. As the saying goes, Christians are like tea bags. What's in them will come out when under hot water. Automatic responses come from repetitious actions. I think it was December of 2018 when we started looking at the Advent. 4 words, one each Sunday. The 4 Advent words are hope, peace, joy, and love. And I remember saying to myself, these are the same words each year for the Advent season. I don't want to teach and emphasize the same words every Christmas. Then God began to do something in me. He began to highlight only one of those words to me over and over and over and over again. That word was hope. And I realized that I knew what that word meant. But was it a natural response of mine? And then the summer of 2019, I noticed that every subject that God was giving me to teach aligned with that word and 3 more over and over and over again. You probably know them. Hope, trust, faith, and rest. Put them in any alignment you want. Trust, faith, rest, hope. Over and over and over and over. It wasn't the Advent words, but everything was continually connected to hope, trust, faith, and rest. If you've watched any of our teachings, you'll notice that somewhere and somehow hope, faith, trust, and rest was in there. If you know me well, you know that I like variety. I easily tire of doing the same thing over and over. And so it dawned on me. This is something specific that God is doing in our training and discipling. And that was back in 2019. These words were becoming something that was to be an important piece of what he wanted to do in and through us. But how? And then Isaiah 40:31 came. It came into the picture about growth. How do we grow? Growth happens in the wait. Isaiah 40:31 says this, "But those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint." You see, growth happens during the wait. In other words, that passage of scripture in the wait isn't just staying there and waiting for time to pass, but it's a time of action. And then I began, Lord, what do we do in the wait? What do we do in the wait makes all the difference. And then he connected the two. And he says, in the wait. In other words, when your situation happens, you have your situation and then you have the end of your situation. And this middle part is called the wait. Those who wait on the Lord. They serve the Lord. It's not just wait in time, but that's an action word. And God said, you put trust, faith, hope, and rest in the wait. And when you put those things in there, you'll see what happens. So then, 2020 was upon us. It wasn't that long ago. Time to step out of the boat. You remember? But how? Well, we didn't know, but we were ready to step out of the boat anyway. And as we began to kind of figure that out, COVID hit. Bum-ba-dun. And I remember asking, Lord, well, what do you want us to do now? I mean, everything changed. I no longer was able to see you guys. I could only see you on camera. And God said very clearly, now you get to practice what I have been showing you. It's very different than the way I grew up. I grew up hearing a sermon and going, yeah, that was really good. Maybe I took some notes and I'm ready for the next one. This is different. This is called discipleship. This is training and equipping. Something that I didn't know growing up. I thought that discipleship was just hearing about new information about God, and the more newer information you hear, then the more you must grow. I don't know how, but you just grow. You see, I didn't realize that when Jesus was with the disciples in the Gospels, we hear these stories. Now, some of these stories are repeated in multiple Gospels, but do you realize that Jesus spoke these and the disciples wrote them? How well do you have to know a story to write it down word for word? In other words, Jesus must have repeated over and over and over and over and over again, where his disciples can actually repeat the very words. I remember I traveled with Frank Gonzalez, and he preached specific sermons. And because we were in a different town every week, he was able, for whatever season, he would use a certain set of messages at a time. Well, we heard him every day on the team, and I memorized them. I mean, to the point where I wrote them in the back of my Bible. I mean, I can tell you the messages. Earlier in my ministry, I preached them. I knew them so well. To this day, I give you words that Frank Gonzalez has told me. And I don't pick them up because I'm reading them somewhere. I wrote them down. It's here. Why? Because he said them over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. Wow. So we hit 2020 and God said, okay, everything was to be put to the test. You see, it's one thing to know what these words mean. It's another thing to know what it's like to use these words. Now we come all the way back to the 10 bridesmaids. Let me quickly remind you, the foolish bridesmaid did not prepare for what was coming. They did not get the extra oil they would need for the journey. What is our oil? Trust, faith, hope, and rest. What God has been doing in us is preparing us for what he is about to bring. In order to see and handle what God is about to do, trust, faith, hope, and rest must be automatic. Not something that we know where we wrote it down. If it's not automatic, we will spend our time battling back and forth with each situation that is in front of us and totally miss being part of a great move of God. Automatic responses come from repetitious actions. How do you keep God's people distracted while God is doing something great? You throw a problem at them. And those that don't know what to do with difficult situations, they will spend the whole time worrying, being stressed only seeing what bad can happen and full of anxiety from every situation, the very opposite of trust, faith, hope, and rest. Without trust, faith, hope, and rest, you will tend to look for something in the natural to give you encouragement. You will tend to look for something in the natural to give you some kind of hope for that day. You will need some kind of positive news to bring hope into your day. When God becomes your hope and encouragement, you don't need news that's good. Those who automatically throw hope, trust, and faith at a situation will be able to see all of what God is doing. Those without these elements will see great hopeless situations, and will continue to look for hope from natural sources. Automatic responses come from repetitious actions. There's a reason that God whittled down Gideon's army from 32,000 to 300. First of all, God has never needed the majority to move in a great way. Secondly, he knew that all of the 32,000 were not going to fight. Why train people how to fight if they are not going to fight? When the Apostle Paul was shipwrecked, an angel appeared to him and said, in the midst of the confusion, he said, "Fear not, Paul. You're not going to die. God said you were going to speak to Caesar in Rome. You're not going to die." You see, sometimes God will give us a word before the storm hits. Then that word becomes an anchor that keeps our emotions together. God's a genius. There are many words that God has given us, and we are to use them as anchors to hold on to. And we will, in the coming weeks, begin to pull out all the words that he's been giving us and learn how to do that, because these words are the anchors that we need. If trust, faith, hope, and rest are not coming automatically when you face situations in your life and you want them to, all you need to do is directly apply them over and over. Trust, faith, hope, and rest to every situation. What do you mean trust? Trust is simple. Trust is when you take your situation and you put the outcome in God's hands automatically. Okay, here's the situation. Right? Okay, but God, I put the outcome in your hands, and I trust that you are going to see the outcome. I don't know how the process is. That's trust. Faith is simply you take a word from Scripture. You take a promise of God, and you choose to hold on to that word. Not because it feels good, not because, ow, my fingers hurt. No. You hold on to that no matter what. You put your faith and you hold that onto it. Hope is to imagine what good God can do in that situation. Yeah, but look, we're all good at imagining what bad can happen. We know how that works. It's automatic, isn't it? It's automatic. We don't have to sit there and go, okay, what bad can happen? Wait, let's see. If I don't pay that bill, what bad can happen? Let's see. Oh, man, I can't think. See, we don't do that. It's automatic. But we have to train ourselves to think of hope. We serve a God of hope. And so we need to train ourselves. Automatic responses come from repetitious actions. And that's how God moves in that. We need automatic. We need automatic. We need automatic trust, automatic faith, automatic hope, automatic rest in order to see what God is about to do. So what God is putting us is so that nothing can distract us from stepping into experiencing all that God is going to do. Automatic responses come from repetitious actions. Now remember, your perception of the problem is bigger than the problem itself. Remember that. So start applying to every situation, and whatever you do, don't give up. It's not too late. Let me say that again. It's not too late. The devil wants you to think that it's too late for you to start right now. Hey, you haven't been paying attention. You're one of the five foolish bridesmaids, and you're not prepared. And the devil goes, it's too late for you. That's a lie. That's a lie. When that thought comes into mind, you know what you do? You just throw trust at it. Oh, it's too late. Yeah, but God's going to take care of this and me. And then you throw faith at it. And then you throw a big piece of hope at it. And then you rest in who God is for you in the situation. God is intending for everyone hearing this broadcast to experience him in what he is going to be doing. He is going to be doing a great thing. And when things look bleak and you go, well, where's the great thing? That's when you put into first gear trust. And then second gear into faith. And then hope. And then fourth. And then if you got a fifth gear, joy goes right into there. I don't know. That depends what kind of vehicle you have. The only thing that can stop you is you. All of heaven is in your corner. What if we choose not to stop ourselves? What might that look like? If we have control over ourselves. I don't have control over you. Nicole has no control over me. I don't have control over her. But I have myself. What if I choose and decide to not let anything stop me? If all of heaven is in my corner, let's make trust, faith, and hope. Let's make it automatic. Why not? Automatic responses come from repetitious actions. So then I close with Isaiah 40:31. But those who wait on the Lord with trust, faith, hope, and rest shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. We want a great move of God. We want to see a great awakening, a great revival. We must pay the price of the oil. Or we will focus our attention on the problem rather than the problem solver. There is a great wisdom in 2 Corinthians 5:7. For we walk by faith, not by what we see with our eyes. You can do this. I can do this. It's not too late. So what do you say? Yes. Let's do it? Yes. All right. That's right. Why not? Right? Why not? So I trust that this week will be a week where all of us continue to repeat putting faith and trust and hope into every situation. Right now, there's a situation that you know where exactly how to put it. And no matter how hard it is, when I tried playing that guitar, no matter how much it hurt, if I would have stuck with that, I would have been a guitar player today. But I didn't. So don't stop. Don't stop. Automatic responses come from repetitious actions. God bless you. Have a great day, a great week, a great month, and a great year, because the best is yet to come. All right. Thank you for spending this time with me. Your feedback is always welcome, and any contributions to this ministry are appreciated. Now may your week be great, and your hope in what God can do have no limits.